Welcome. My name is Amy. I'm the president of the Jeffco PTA, Amy Sapphire. I would like to introduce you to Chandra Benoit. She is our treasurer and she will be leading our presentation this evening. Go ahead.
Thanks, Amy. Welcome, everybody. Hopefully we are gonna go through these slides. I do want to thank you guys before we get started. For those of you that are treasurers for your PTA, you have one of the hardest and most important jobs. So I just want to recognize that right off the bat. Thank you for all you do for your school and your PTA. And hopefully tonight, we'll make sure that everybody's learning the do's and the don'ts and all the things that we need to do as treasurers to make sure that we're being accountable and transparent. So that's kind of the theme of tonight, being accountable and transparent as a treasurer. If I can get this to work. All right. So today what we're going to talk about are the roles and responsibilities of the treasurer, financial audit, the first 30 days, financial audit, your annual budget, disbursements, collecting money, taxes, insurance, all that fun stuff.
Are you serious right now, bro?
And then fundraising. All right, so let's start with roles and responsibilities. So what are the tasks of the treasurer? All right, so there's a list of main duties that kind of just lay out what the treasurer needs to do. First of all, your first duty is to maintain accurate, detailed financial records. Again, it's all about transparency, showing folks that we're being accountable with their money. Help prepare the PTA budget. That you'll want to work with your president as well as the rest of your board to help set up a budget that the PTA will vote on, and that will be what you're going to use for the rest of the year with amendments possibly. But receive and disperse funds, present a treasurer's report at the PTA meetings, prepare an IRS tax return, which will be either a 990, 990EZ, or a 990N, depending on how much your PTA has and how much you've made. You need to file the Colorado Secretary of State documents if applicable, and then prepare the books for the annual audit, which is also known as a financial review. So your first 30 days, now I know this training is happening past your first 30 days, but this may be a good chance to make sure you did what you needed to do in those first 30 days, as well as prepare you for the next first 30 days when you start your next fiscal year. So upon taking office, first, what you need to do is make sure that the books are audited and the financial review has been completed from the prior year before you accept them. You want to make sure that those things are ready to go, and you're starting with a clean slate. You need to file signature cards with your bank or whatever process your bank has in order for you to get a debit card for your account or a card for your account. You need to study the duties and any references to the finances and budget that are in your specific PTA bylaws. Check on bond and liability insurance. Most folks are going to have that coming up here due soon. You need to make sure that you know what the status is of that and when you need to renew those. And then check the files and see if all the records that you need are there. A couple of, here's some checklists to let you know what you should have in your treasurer files. So first of all, you're going to have your checkbook, check requests or vouchers. We'll go over that a little bit later. Commercial deposit slips, endorsement stamp, receipt book, bank statements, account ledger, audit and the financial review report from the previous year, the adopted budget, the bylaws, minutes of meetings, membership roster, tax records, and prior year's records. So if you get the records and any of this stuff is missing, you want to make sure you ask about those immediately and try to work with the previous officers to get that information. Also, when you take office, I mentioned it before, but you want to become familiar with your PTA bylaws. Some of the things are going to be very specific on what you can and can't do according to your specific bylaws. And then again, file a new signature card with the bank. Requirements vary bank to bank, so make sure you work with your bank, but they usually require minutes from a standing meeting stating that you are the new treasurer, whoever the new vice president is, or whoever else needs to be signing on the accounts, you're going to need those minutes showing that your PTA has elected you guys. And then you'll also need a copy of your driver's license, likely. All right, financial audit. Again, this is going to be done at the end of your fiscal year, but this is some good information for us to go over because you don't want to wait till the last minute to compile everything for the financial audit. It will just make your life not so fun in the summer. Again, we're wanting to be accountable with those funds. So the purpose for the financial review is twofold. One, it's to certify the accuracy of the books and the records. So you got to make sure that you've got all of your receipts, you're tracking where your budget's being spent and what money you brought in. And it's to assure the membership that the association's resources and funds are being managed responsibly. Again, this isn't your money, it's not the board's money, the money belongs to the membership. So we do need to be accountable to them that we are being wise with the money. So audit procedures and docs. If you go to the jeffcopta.org, and I apologize, that's really kind of clumped together, but it's jcpta.org. You can go to running your PTA, and in that you can see it'll give you some helpful information, like the financial records should be reviewed at least once a year. This is pulled right off of there. Anytime there's a change in financial officers, you want to make sure that those records are correct. So I would recommend, anytime you have a new board or any major changes, I would recommend doing a financial audit. And then the documents that need to be reviewed, the prior year's completed financial review report, that's going to be your starting point for what numbers to fill out. Your current year financial review report, that's where you note what you've brought in and what you've spent, what's outstanding, checkbook and canceled checks, bank statements and deposit receipts, account ledger, the last treasurer's report from your last meeting, expense vouchers and receipts, and then any other information requested by your financial review committee. Depending on what is written in your bylaws, your audit attendees may look a little bit different, but typically it's 2 to 3 PTA members who are not current signers on the bank account. So if your president, vice president, and treasurer are signers on your account, and 2 or 3 other members who are not those offices, which is good, again, because we're trying to be accountable with the money, and we want to be accountable to everybody in the PTA. The incoming treasurer can be an audit committee member unless they were a signer on the account the year before. So if somebody's going from vice president to treasurer, or vice versa, from one signing role to another signing role, then they cannot count as 2 or 3 non-signers. Hired accountant with nonprofit expertise. If you're a school that brings in a lot of donations, this might be a benefit to you. This is primarily, again, for PTAs that receive enough donations over $100,000 to require an IRS Form 990. So if you're doing a 990N or a 990EZ, probably not necessary for you to bring in an accountant. Financial review is due 30 days after the fiscal year ends. Again, check your bylaws for what your PTA specifies. You can download a copy of the audit or financial review report at this link. So it's the Jeffco PTA website. We'll send these slides out. I think we'll send the slides out. If not, maybe we can put the link in the chat, but we'll make sure that it gets out to you guys so you know where to find that. You're going to want to make 4 copies of that financial review report when you've completed it. One, you're going to file the audit report with the Colorado PTA. You want a copy for the treasurer, a copy for the secretary, and a copy for the president. I guess any questions on that, the financial review, before we move on? All right. So something pops up, go ahead and type it in the questions, and we'll maybe tackle them at the end if nothing comes up.
No questions so far.
Okay, thanks, Sandy. I appreciate that. All right, your annual budget. So preparing and updating the budget.
Oops.
Budget is a statement of projected revenues and expenses. So this is, again, what do you think you're planning on bringing in to the PTA that year? And what do you plan to expend? Your PTA unit cannot spend money until the budget is approved by the members. This is a really important thing to remember. So, there's a lot of times events can happen at the beginning of the school year, but maybe you haven't had a PTA meeting yet. If your PTA has not approved a budget for that school year, no money can be spent. So sometimes it's good for you to possibly vote on the budgets anticipated financial needs in the fall in the spring. Now you can modify amend your budgets as you progress, but that's kind of a good way to help make sure you bridge that gap. I know at my school, when we had a fall carnival that usually took place before we could get a whole PTA, we could get everybody together. So we would add that fall budget into the year before, but made sure that we had the accounts for that. All right, so drafting the budget, you want to form a committee of 3 to 5 members. It's good to have non-board members participate in this. You want to review the prior year's actuals versus budgeted receipts and disbursements. If you were on the training of the president's training, Amy mentioned, usually your budgets are pretty close year to year. What you fundraise is likely you're probably going to be within a slight percentage of that. So basing your budget off of the previous year is a great starting point.
How do I change the name on here, dude?
All right. Let's see. First, you want to determine how much money your unit will need to cover anticipated expenses for the current year. And then next, you want to determine how you're going to pay for those expenses. So it goes back to the don't fundraise or don't bring in funds without knowing how you're going to spend those. You want to first know what are the costs that you need to cover, and then you work to find out a way to cover those. Draft a preliminary budget worksheet based on the budget committee's projections. You projected income should equal projected expenses plus some reserves. You want to allocate sufficient funds for members to attend training, maybe PTA conventions or conferences. Thankfully, like this training doesn't cost you guys anything, so that's a good piece. But making sure that you do have funds available for members to attend necessary trainings is a great line item to have in your budget. Consider including an emergency reserve fund if your budget in your budget for unplanned expenses, or maybe next year's startup costs, etc. Something a little bit to have as a carryover. Again, we are not for profit, so you don't want to continue to carry a ton over, but having a little bit in reserve is not a bad idea. So this is a sample budget worksheet. This was saying, for this example shows the school year 2007 to 2008, what was budgeted versus the next column, which shows what was actually spent that school year. And so those numbers were used to help create a proposed budget for 2008-2009 school year. All right, adopting and amending your budget. Now, the preliminary draft should be presented to the PTA board first for consideration and discussion. And then if the board approves, then you're going to want to present it to your entire PTA membership. The budget must be presented at a general PTA meeting and voted on by the members. A majority vote of the members present is required for adoption. And then the adoption of the budget authorizes the PTA to spend other people's money. That's why you need to have your whole PTA approve it, or the majority of your PTA, for expenses covered in the budget. And that's underlined because that's the key part, is that this budget is other people's money. So again, we want to be transparent and accountable. Amendments can be made to your budget, but they can only be made at general membership meetings. So you can't just call a board meeting to say, we're going to do this, we're going to change the budget this way, and we're going to proceed. That's a starting point. If your board agrees, that's great, but you still have to bring it to the general PTA membership in order for them to approve it. And amendments require, again, a majority vote of the members present at a general meeting, or I guess sometimes you can call special meetings as long as it's for that purpose only. But again, it has to be the membership of the PTA, not just the board. So here is another sample of an adopted budget. It was kind of like that, the sample of the working out the proposed budget is basically just that first column. It begins showing you what the expected revenue is for that year and the expected expenses on the bottom. You can see here that they're expecting to bring in 28,000, expecting to spend 26,000. So they're trying to reserve $2,000 for startup costs for the next school year, or as a reserve for other expenses. All right, disbursements. So how to properly document money being spent and how do you pay folks back, right? So money matters. All checks require 2 authorized signatures. Never sign a blank check. So if you as a treasurer, if you need to reimburse somebody for something or you need to pay for something, you can be one of those signers, and one of the other signers on the account obviously has to sign that check with you as well. You don't want to sign a check, a blank check, and leave it else to sign. Things happen, it might get lost. You just never know what could happen, but you don't want to leave a blank check, because then you're kind of setting yourself and your account up to be hit pretty hard if something were to go wrong.
Is it possible to go back to the budget? Looks like we have a lot of budget questions, or do you want to just answer those at the end?
We can go back, that's fine.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions in the chat.
Okay, what are some of the questions we've got?
Okay, I'll start with the first one. It has to do with Form 99. It's what do we do with the Form 99? Excuse me, 990, sorry.
No, that's okay. We will get to the 990 on a later slide.
Oh, okay. Then as far as budget, it's can you approve budget line item for next year's spending to have some for before first vote?
Yes, and that's kind of that reserve piece or startup fund. Again, your whole PTA budget or your whole PTA is going to have to be approved by the membership. Sorry. You don't want to do a large amount because you could have a different board, you could have a different membership setup. But at that point, your membership is basically saying, we are fine with forwarding on this chunk of money to cover expenses at the beginning of the next year. So as long as it's approved by the membership, that is acceptable. You just, I'd say rule of thumb, use your best judgment. You don't want to put $20,000 forward, but it's okay to put some reserves forward.
So I think that ties into the next question, which is, can we approve the budget at the end of the year for the school year before?
I don't know if there's a rule against that or not, but I would say, because you may have a new board and you're going to have new membership, I would suggest waiting, but I don't really know if there's a rule against it or not. So let me look into that, though. That's a great question. I don't know. Go ahead, Sandy.
Oh, I was just going to move on to the next question. Can we approve I'm sorry. How much money do you suggest carrying over to the next year?
Oh, I think that is really school dependent, depending on your finances and what you've got. Just be reasonable. Again, we're non-for-profit, so we need to spend what we've got. But I would say, I've seen anywhere from 2,000 to 5,000 carried over, but again, it really depends on what your school's budget is.
Okay,
So-
the next question is a repeat, and then it's, what happens if something last minute comes up? Can we have an emergency fund and just have board approve how we spend that?
You can have emergency funds. As long as it's in your original budget, you can do that. It would have to be in your bylaws that would be allowed, that the board could approve the spending of that. I don't know that that's extremely recommended though, because you have to be careful what's considered an emergency as well, because also remember that this money is for bettering the school as a whole. It can't be used to benefit specific individuals. So the thing that comes to mind is we had a teacher whose husband passed away, and obviously folks were like, oh, we want to support the teacher as much as we can, but you can't use PTA funds for that to give them just money to support them, because that's not for the benefit of everybody. That's really not what PTA is intended for. So the issue there would be what's considered an emergency and who determines that, and are you using those funds appropriately for an emergency?
Okay, we have an understanding that the executive team can approve changes of less than $500. Anything more needs to go through the general meeting. Is that okay?
As long as it's in your bylaws, that's the biggest thing, is it has to be in the bylaws. If it's not in your PTA bylaws, then that's going against the rules. So my last school, that was kind of an understanding, and we thought that was an understanding. We looked at the bylaws and we're like, no, that's not in here. It says everything needs to go to the board. So you really have to look closely at what the bylaws say for that.
Okay, what constitutes,
I'm sorry, could I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
My question was the one of an emergency coming up, and the example was special needs classroom needed a new menial board, it broke, and the school didn't have the money to pay for it. So what we just did is we as a board said we have the money for it in a slush fund and we'll pay for it. So are you saying that we can't do that?
No, I'm not, definitely not. And to be honestly, that is almost more like we would consider like a ways and means kind of committee too. If you're, able to purchase things for the classrooms, or teachers can ask for things for their classrooms. But again, you just want to make sure that it's in your bylaws, so that it's clearly spelled out that that's what these funds are going to be used for. Now, a board, like a technology board or whatever you called it, I'm sorry, for a teacher's classroom, that's just the teacher, that's benefiting her whole class. So that would be an appropriate use of the funds, as long as you're just going about it in the correct way. Did that answer your question?
Yes, and I have one follow-up question. I have to look at our bylaws.
Sure.
I don't know if it was in there or not. Can you revise the bylaws before the 3 years?
That would be a question. Amy, are you on? Can you answer that question?
Yes, about updating the bylaws before, oh, that is a good question.
I can take it if you,
Yes, go ahead. You've been studying up on this.
I have. Bylaws can be updated at any point in time, even if you're still within that 3 years. A couple things to keep in mind when you do update the bylaws. One, if they are membership approved, they're effective immediately. And then you do need to submit them as soon as that approval has happened to Colorado PTA for final approval.
Great. Thank you, Crystal.
okay, the next one is, what constitutes a budget amendment? Moving funds from one event to another?
Yep, that would constitute, because you are changing how the board, how your membership has voted to spend the funds. So even if your total expenses hasn't changed, if you're moving it from one account, one line item to the other, that technically should require or that technically would need an amendment vote.
And if we have a fundraiser in October, does this mean we have to have a budget approved before then? Does the interim approved budget in May 2024 serve as the approved budget for 24-25?
Again, so let's see, the fundraising piece, I think that kind of falls into two. If it's going to cost you money to do the fundraiser before you've had a vote on a budget, then you're going to want to make sure that you do have funds to cover, you know, prizes or whatever. If you're doing that for the fundraiser, you're going to want to make sure that you do have enough carryover to cover those. As far as, I think the question might be aimed more as you're earning money before you have plans to spend it. If that's a concern, I think it's good for maybe your PTA to have a running task of things you're hoping to spend money on. I would say I would never deter you guys from doing your fundraiser if you know you're going to be able to spend it, or if you have, you know, maybe your school's got ideas or your membership has ideas on ways to spend it. I don't think you need to hold off on your fundraiser until you have the budget laid out. Just, you know, what comes first, the chicken or the egg. But again, you just do want to make sure that what you are fundraising, you are spending and you're being responsible with it. So I hope that helped with that question.
So those were all the budget questions.
Okay, perfect. We'll move on. And if there's any other questions that pop up, feel free to let me know, or we can circle back around at the end. So we're at 7:30 now, and I've got several more slides to go. So thanks for those questions. Those are great questions. All right, so disbursements, again, how to document money being properly spent. Making sure that the checks require 2 signatures. Banks are likely not going to take them if they don't have both signature lines signed anyways. All expenses should be paid by check or debit card. Never use cash. It's just a hard paper trail. So if you get a large, if you have cash, deposit that into your PTA account and then write the check. Don't, it's not proper use to use the cash like that. It's better to have the check or debit card, which are going to give you better receipts and trails. All checks written should be only for authorized expenses, included in the budget or recorded in the meeting minutes. So again, that's making sure that you've got everything approved in the budget before you spend money on it. And then all check requests should include a receipt. No receipt equals no reimbursement. Now, you know, maybe you're gonna say, okay, somebody can print out an email confirmation or something. That, you know, you'll have to work up with that. But especially as you get into larger sums, you know, any of it actually, I just should say that no receipt, no reimbursement. You need to make sure that you're covered as the treasurer. Again, we're being responsible and transparent with the money that's being spent. So all debit and credit cards need to have the same documentation. And I run into this myself sometimes. It's like, oh, we've got, you know, the checking account has that that monthly debit card purchase for this and that. So it's easy to forget to do the documentation that you need to do, just like any other expense. So protect yourself. It's always prudent to email your board and notify them when you're going to be using the debit or credit card to pay an expense. Amy's always shooting me a message saying, hey, I'm using the card for this, which is already authorized, but she's letting me know that's going on. So it's a good idea. Keep everybody in the know. Check requests and records. So a voucher should be filled out for every check written or debit card transaction. And I've got an example to show you guys. The information to include on the voucher, the date, the check number, or if it's a debit card, you're not going to have a check number, obviously. Description of the expense, budget line item, where that's coming out of in your budget, that's important. And then the amount to be paid and who the payee is. And again, receipts need to be attached. So this is just a quick little smushed example to show you what an expense voucher is. Again, it's got the date, what budget category does it come out of, what is the item, the amount, who to make the check payable to, check requested by the committee chairperson. That's good also if somebody is submitting for reimbursement and they're not your chair, the committee chair, it's good to make sure that your committee chairs are aware of the money that's being spent on their committees as well. And then make sure you know, it's good to have both the president and the PTA approve that as well. So this is just an example. You know, if you've got a different one for your PTA that works, use what works for you. All right, collecting money, how to handle money coming in. So you want to keep a detailed record of all deposits being made, including all individual checks included in that deposit, and attach the receipt issued by the bank. So I've gone in after fundraisers at my other PTA with stacks and stacks of checks, and they would sit there and run them all, but I made sure that I had those deposit slips. And I would keep those in my binder. Now, a lot of the times the electronic statements will show you copies of all those checks. I would check that out and see if that's an option for you, but it's just good to make sure you kind of have that detailed record again of the checks that are being deposited. Deposit all funds promptly in the PTA bank account. You know, you don't want to be responsible for accidentally losing the money or something happening to it. So deposit it as fast as you can, as soon as you can. And then hopefully you've got an endorsement stamp for the back of your checks. If you end up with a lot of checks, saves you from having to sign and write on every single one of them. Cash money counts should be conducted by at least 2 people. So if you've got an event that brings in a lot of cash, it's good to have at least, I usually do 2 folks plus myself. I'll have the 2 folks double check, count each other, or, you know, count the money, check each other's math. And then there's a form here at the bottom that they show you. The top of the form is where they show what they've calculated. The bottom of the form is for the treasurer to count and show what they've calculated. The big don't just go by what other people say they have seen on that. You really do need to count it for yourself. Sometimes bills get stuck together and miscounting happens. So you want to make sure that you do your own verification. And if you guys are coming up with different numbers, recount it all and double check. Again, you just want to make sure that we're being as transparent as possible. Issue a receipt signed by both people, of course, verifying the count, and attach the copy to your record, to your deposit record. So here's the example that I was talking about. This top part is again, the count by the folks that I'm having help me. Usually, like I said, I usually will have 2 folks count it other than myself. Oh, sorry. And then the treasurer verification is on the bottom. All right. Taxes, insurance, etc. So I know there was a question on the 990 form, so we'll hopefully cover that and answer that question here now. All right, so the treasurer's report. Every meeting you need to make a treasurer's report. You want to present that obviously at the board meetings as well as your other meetings to your entire membership. You want to show income and expenses by line item, actual versus budgeted. And then your budget amount, you want to talk about the monthly report, year-to-date totals, and the variance and differences. So this is just an example that we've been using. You can do different reports, whatever works for you guys, as long as you're, again, showing the difference between what you budgeted and what you've actually spent. This one, we're showing also remaining amounts. And then I like the visual, the graphic part of it. So I can see on this line item at this point in time, there was 72% of the budget remaining. Up top, we note the current balance, any outstanding expenses or deposits, and then what that ending balance would be for that point in time. All right, keeping in good standing. So this is all still part of that taxes and insurance and all of that. Make sure that a current officers list is filed with the Colorado PTA by June 1st. This isn't necessarily a thing that falls on the treasurer, but as a board, you guys need to, the board needs to ensure that this is uploaded by June 1st. It's a treasurer, you know, you're probably going to be getting notifications if this hasn't been uploaded. So it's good just to remind your president, your vice president, other folks on the board that that needs to be done. You do need to file the membership reports and dues by October 1st and February 1st of each. So October 1st is next Tuesday. Hopefully you guys have gotten those prepared. If you haven't submitted them already, you're going to need to do that by next Tuesday. And as well as sending a check or paying online for your members. You need to pay liability insurance premiums on time. So if you've got AIM, I think most of us have AIM renewal, or insurance renewals due November 1st. So you want to make sure that that's paid. You want to, the liability insurance covers the PTA. It covers you, it covers us for all sorts of things. So it's important to ensure that that's up to date. You need to send a copy of your financial review committee report to the Colorado PTA via compliance in Member Hub. And I think this is now give backs as opposed to Member Hub. But you do need to upload it that way. You can send copies of your Form 990, 990EZ, or proof that you filed the 990N, if that's the postcard version. You also need to send that to Colorado PTA, and proof that you've registered with the Secretary of State, if applicable. You're going to want to send that to the COPTA as well. And those just go to office@copta.org. All right, let's get a little bit more detail on the recording member dues. So state and national dues should be recorded as accounts payable in your financial records and subtracted from your ending bank balance on financial reports. For every membership, regardless of what you collect per member, you as a PTA can determine what your membership fees are. Regardless of what you charge your members, you will have to pay $6.25 to the Colorado PTA. Out of that $6.25, $3 stays with the Colorado PTA, $2.25 goes to the National PTA, and then $1 comes back to the Jeffco PTA Council. These are payable again in October and February, along with your membership list. Insurance and bonding, again, we kind of talked about the AIM coming up due here in November. General liability insurance protects local PTAs against liability lawsuits arising from injuries and property damage. The bond insurance protects against losses due to embezzlement. That's not a fun thing to think about, but unfortunately it does happen. So it's important that your PTA be covered by that insurance if that were to arise. So you want to review the insurance policy and educate your unit regarding what PTA sponsored events are covered and what events are excluded. A lot of time, different event places, they'll want to have proof of your insurance, or they're gonna want to have, I think sometimes the Jeffco schools want to be added they want to add it as a rider, which I don't fully understand, but it's just important to know, again, what's covered under your insurance and what's not. Ever in doubt, just call your insurance provider and talk with them, and they'll let you know if it's covered or not. All right, tax returns. So this is just a quick little table to kind of explain what tax returns you would likely need to file. So if you receive less than $50,000, or if you bring in less than $50,000, you're likely going to have to file the Form 990N, or what is known as an e-postcard. That is due electronically by the 15th day of the 5th month after your year end. So usually it's the end of June. June, July is that changeover for most PTAs. So that's going to be the end of November, I believe, the 15th of November. I believe that's what it's due. It's 15th of November, I think. I had this one known once upon a time, but you'll just want to do that calculation. There are no extensions with this form, but it is super simple. The postcard, it's basically just getting on the IRS website and clicking a couple of things. Now, if you make between 200,000 and 50,000 a year, then you'll complete the Form 990 EZ, which includes schedules A, G, and or O by the 15th day again. Now these schedules, it'll tell you right on the IRS website what needs to be included. I think it's usually just your financial report, but it'll explain to you exactly what's on there. If you make more than $200,000, if your PTA does, you'll need to complete the Form 990. And again, that is due by the 15th day of the 5th month after your year end. If you need an extension, you need to complete Form 8868 and mail it by the due date for an automatic 6-month extension. If your return is late, there's a $20 penalty that may be charged to you. If your unrelated business income is greater than $1,000, you need to file a Form 990T with your return. And just know that the IRS defines unrelated business income as income from a trade or business regularly carried on by a nonprofit organization. So that's not something I've never had to deal with. I'm not sure if anybody on here has had to deal with that before, but typically it's going to be the postcard, the 990 EZ, or for a very small handful of our PTAs, it could be the Form 990. So 501c3 tax exempt status. Now, all local unit PTAs are considered subordinate units under the Colorado PTA, which has the 501c3 status. So all units, that's why, that's what gives us that tax exempt status. Now, however, all units do have their own EIN for receipts on donations and for filing taxes. The tax exemption number is used to purchase items and be exempt from Colorado state taxes. And so all units should use the same tax exempt number, which is for the Colorado PTA. The Colorado PTA has a copy of the IRS determination letter, verification that your unit isn't a subordinate, and the tax exempt certificate. So you're welcome to request a copy of that from the Colorado PTA so that you can use that as you're purchasing things for the PTA or with PTA funds. Yeah. All right, registering as a 501c3 org in Colorado. So now if your gross income is greater than 25,000, you will still need to file the Colorado Charitable Solicitations Act. So I guess I kind of had these a little bit confused on the slides, and I apologize for that. We still can fall under the Colorado PTA's tax exemption. However, each PTA will likely, if you make over 25,000, you still will need to be registered as your own 501c3 organization. First, you need to get you'll need to get a Colorado Business Registration ID from the Secretary of State website. And you register with the Colorado Secretary of State as a fundraising 501c3 organization. And the registration deadline for the Colorado Charitable Solicitations Act is the same day as the Form 990 filing deadline. So we're coming up on all of those deadlines here, to get your taxes filed, as well as getting your Charitable Solicitations Act information filed. So for instructions on how to file, the Secretary of State website has got a great walkthrough. You can select Licensing Center from the menu bar, and then under the frequently asked questions and instructions, select registration instructions for charitable organizations. I will say too, if you go through this process, it's nice for you for the following year, as well as whoever's going to be your predecessor. to make notes of the steps that you're going through. So that way it's a little bit easier for them in case those notes weren't left for you beforehand. All right, any questions? I don't know that I fully answered the tax question, but any other questions before we go on to our last couple of sections?
So there's a bunch of questions, but I think we should just kind of wait till the end, and
Okay.
because there are a
Sounds-
lot. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandy.
Uh-huh.
And this is actually our last section, I believe. And it's probably might answer some of those questions. It's some of the bigger ones that we typically get. So we're gonna go over fundraising do's and don'ts. All right, so speaking of fundraising, just remember that the primary emphasis of the PTA should be promotion of the PTA mission. Fundraising is useful to achieve our goal, but it is not the primary PTA function. We are not here just to raise money for events or for the school. Remember the 3-to-1 rule. For every fundraiser, plan 3 non-fundraising activities that focus on community outreach, enrichment, or advocacy. All right, so of course PTAs can accept money from sponsors. We like sponsors, right? Helps bring in money. But just know that sponsors may not receive substantial benefit in return, and the PTA may not promote the sponsor's products or services. Now, that sounds like we're going to go a little bit more in depth coming up. But basically, you can't say that, oh, thank you for this restaurant for sponsoring us. They've got the best pizza out there. It's not an allowable thing to say. Or, you know, you can put a sponsor's logo on your shirt. That's not considered promoting their products or services. That's just a thank you and for them for sponsoring you. So acknowledging sponsors, the do's. PTAs can acknowledge sponsors verbally from a podium. If you're making a speech, you can thank your sponsors. You can put up signs or banners thanking them for sponsoring an event in print or web coverage of the event, or in a membership newsletters or publications. And sponsors can distribute small items with their logo or display products at a sponsored event. But what we can't do is we can't use qualitative or comparative language about the sponsor's products or services. That's what I was saying. We can't say, oh, they have the best pizza. They've got the highest quality skincare. You can't do those sorts of things. We can't publish price information. We can't offer inducements to use, sell, or purchase the sponsor's products or services. You know, basically we can't offer deals for folks to do that. And we can't advertise on the sponsor's behalf. Again, we can tell them thank you, put their logo, say they have sponsored us, thank you so much. Sponsors cannot make supporting their support contingent on attendance or at an event, broadcasting ratings, or any other degree of public exposure. They can't say, well, if you get 500 people to show up, we're going to increase our sponsorship by 20%. That's not allowable. They need to give freely, and that needs to be part of that. Documentations of contributions. This just kind of shows you, do you want canceled checks? Yes, you want canceled checks for basically everything between $0 to $250. You want to show canceled checks. When you're getting up into the $250 to over $5,000 price contribution made, you're going to want to actually give them a contribution receipt. And that's for anybody. If you've got families that have donated on your fundraisers, you know, typically you're going to want to give them a contribution receipt because their canceled checks isn't really going to be enough to help them with their taxes necessarily. Form 282, or sorry, 8283 if they're over $5,000 contributions. Appraisal on Form 8283, again, for over $5,000. And then you want to identify non-deductible portions for anything over $75. haven't had to deal with that yet. I don't know if any of you guys had, but thankfully not. All right, so we're kind of at the end here. I just want to give you some resources and reinforcement. So Jeffco Council PTA, again, my name is Chandra Benoit. I am the treasurer of the Jeffco PTA. So here is my phone number on the screen. And you can send an email to treasurer@jeffcopta.org to reach me with any questions. We've also got the Colorado PTA and the National PTA headquarters. You know, I would more focus on their emails. There's office@copta.org or their website, or if you need to reach out to nationals, their email is info@pta.org. And with that, I want to thank you guys all again. You got the hardest, most important job. I'm a little biased, but you guys really, want to thank you so much for signing up to do what you're doing.
So if we have a few more minutes, if we could go back to some of the questions we skipped.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so that first one was, what do we do with the Form 990?
So that's, again, that's just basically going to be on the IRS website. However, once you complete filling in your Form 990, whether it's the EZ, the postcard, or the full form, you are going to want to print a copy of that and put that in your records, and you need to submit it to the Colorado PTA, a copy to show that you have filed your taxes. As far as telling you what's on that form, I don't really quite remember. So you're just gonna have to go to the website, on the IRS website, to follow that.
The next question is, can I pay for PTA event items at Sam's Club with my personal business tax exempt and receive a disbursement check for the amount spent?
So if you're the tax exempt with your personal business, basically, as long as it's an approved fund, if it's you've used your own personal check or whatever, yes, as long as you've got those receipts, you can submit for reimbursement. You know, obviously check with the committee head and your treasurer beforehand to let them know that you're going to be spending money, so that they can expect to have to cut you a check. But that shouldn't be a problem.
Okay. This one I feel is not treasury, but I'm still going to ask it because I'm hoping somebody else can chime in. It says, please confirm member vote is attending members rather than paid members. We will have to fold if it's attending members.
So a quorum can be very small. A quorum can be 4. You know, I mean, it can be 4 people. I think at Creighton Middle School, we had it at 6 maybe, and Lakewood PTSA, it's even lower. So it can be small. And if that needs to be modified in your bylaws, go for it. But they have to be paid members that are in attendance. Sometimes people do hybrid meetings. You can have people thumbs up on the screen, and that counts if you've got people in person and people online. But I mean, make your quorum small if your membership in general is small.
I will add to that really quick that a better route for quorum is a percentage of membership. So like saying, 25% of our members is quorum. And that does not hold you to a hard number.
Well, that's a tough one when you've got schools with 200 members.
The next question.
Oh, just real quick on that. Sorry. The next thing, the thing on that would just be, it's important to advertise and let your membership know when you are voting on the budget. And make sure that they know that this is their chance to review what the money is being spent on, that they're part of this membership and their input is important. So try to ensure, do everything you can to try to make sure that your attendance is high on those budget votes.
The next question is, why would you need a copy of your deposited checks?
Jessie Feldman is on this call too. Jessie is our Colorado PTA treasurer, and she's been answering a lot of questions in the chat.
Awesome. Jessie, do you want to tackle that one, or I can try?
Copies of deposits. I honestly don't know why you would want those. They're on the bank statements if you need record of them. And you wouldn't want to keep the checks if you're depositing them via mobile.
I think the slide said canceled checks.
Oh, canceled checks? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, keep copies of canceled checks.
Okay, that makes more sense then, because that was my question, and I thought it was copies of all your deposited checks from, let's say, your fundraiser, and
No.
I'd have like a running total, but I've never copied them all and kept them, so I just didn't.
Yeah.
No, the
I
cleared
think it would-
checks makes more sense.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay, the
That's
next question
At
is,
the beginning, yeah.
we have a budget line item for staff grants for all of our staff members, whereby they write an application for funds where they detail what they'd like to spend money on, and funds are provided, but receipts are not collected for these funds. Is this legally legitimate way to alleviate the burden of providing receipts while still being accountable and transparent?
Everything should have a receipt. The teachers, yeah, obviously like writing the grant and showing you what everything's gonna cost is, that's important, but you could be setting yourself up for an issue if the money is not spent on what it's supposed to be spent on. So you really should be doing those receipts. Or one recommendation I would have is if the teachers apply for a grant, if they know they want specific items, then maybe you as the treasurer purchase those items. And then you've got those receipts, you've got, you can use the tax-free number as well, or tax exempt number. So, but you really shouldn't be allowing folks to just spend money without collecting receipts.
Okay, so we're at 8. I just want to know if we want to keep going. I think there's a couple more, or what you want to do.
I think we can open it up at this point if people have questions they want to ask out loud to the group for about another 5 to 10 minutes at the most, if that's okay.
One of my questions was, is it okay for a business to say, hey, we're going to have a Marchdale Monday, and all the money that's collected that day, they'll give 10% back to the school? Or
I think that would be very much like a restaurant night. Yes, I think that's okay.
Mhm. Did it answer your question, Laura? Yeah, we do that a lot. A lot of different PTAs too.
I'd like to go back to the question regarding the grants for the teachers.
Okay.
And if not providing the receipts, AIM in their insurance guide, they have a voucher that you can look at, a donation receipt that you provide to, say, those teachers. And in there, it identifies you're allotted X amount of dollars to spend on X. You need to provide receipts by this date. And if you don't, then funds need to be returned. Because I do agree that you have to have all those receipts and the deposits. It is a burden to track that, especially on the teacher. So if the teacher is not able to provide those receipts, then yes, having the PTA take that burden and purchase those items on behalf of the teacher, that might be the best route to do going forward for those grants.
Thank you, Jesse. Appreciate that. Any other questions?
I'm sorry, can we discuss using Venmo over givebacks? I know that there was a lot of questions on that I saw come through.
Yeah, so, Amy, go ahead.
So Givebacks is free. Givebacks is a free tool. It's approved. Your bank account is linked right to it. You can create QR codes if you want to sell t-shirts, memberships. If you want to take general donations, you can link it to silent auctions. You can link it to fundraisers. It's so easy. It's so easy. I mean, I brought a QR code to the back to school bash, and Mary Parker, our school board rep, snapped a picture of it and became a member on the spot right there. It's like, why do you need another when, not approved resource when there is one right in front of you? Yes, Givebacks is the new name for Member Hub.
I want to comment on that with, like, for instance, when we have a festival at school, how do we get parents to pay with that? We don't have any internet we don't have any cell service or internet there because we live in the mountains. So they can't use the QR code, but Venmo, they can send it, when before or after, that kind of thing. So it's a little harder. So is there a reason why we can't set up a Venmo account for the PTA?
I'd like, maybe-
Jesse had a really good response to this that in the chat that I just want to highlight really quick. And so any Venmo account has to be tied to a personal phone number. And that's what makes it challenging to pass down with the high turnover rates within our membership. So when it's tied to your personal cell phone number, one, you can't use that cell phone number for any other Venmo account. And then Venmo is very challenging to get that information changed over. It's not easy to change that phone number. So that's the complicated part with that.
yeah,
Can we
and Crystal,
switch it to Zelle, which is tied to an account, a banking account? That's a different pay app.
if your PTA bank account offers Zelle, that's an option. And
Okay.
adding on to what Crystal said about the Venmo, I've researched this on the Colorado PTA side of things. And yes, you can link your personal account to a nonprofit. However, you can't unlink it. You have to close down your whole personal account and restart a new one to have that nonprofit be assigned to somebody else. So it just becomes a huge headache to be able to transfer ownership of the account.
And then does Givebacks have a way to reimburse? That's the one.
Sorry, to reimburse?
Yeah, so through Venmo, you can do reimbursements also for people submitting expenses for your PTA.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I don't believe so.
Okay.
I think that you'd want to be, just personally, I'd say again, you'd want to be careful with using Venmo for that as well, for the other reasons we've just talked about. But when you're doing the reimbursements, check is honestly, I know it's a hassle. Nobody wants to go to the bank to deposit a check, but that's about the best paper trail that you've got. Personally, all my years doing treasure, I would be hesitant to use another form for reimbursement, but that's my personal opinion.
Going back to the givebacks, I do know people were going in to pay their membership dues, and people paying are getting the fees now. I don't know if anyone else has noticed that.
So Jeffco PTA is an $11 fee, and I believe it costs $12.07 total. So yes.
No, I mean, like, individuals that are paying their dues, they're charged
That
fees.
additional dollar fee or whatever.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
a personal setting that whomever sets up your give back account, you can make that optional. So that's something that you need to take to your board you can adjust that setting, whether you want to pay for the fees or if you want to pass that on to whomever is making the donation or paying for that item.
Okay, but I thought that earlier you guys mentioned that givebacks, there was no fees.
There are no fees to use it, but there are transactional fees on the money collected. That's pretty standard, and you're going to find that with all of those membership programs.
PayPal also has fees associated with it for the transactions. You can utilize givebacks and enter in manually checks and cash. If as a receipt, that's not a fee incurred on behalf of the program, but those transactions, there is a fee.
Can I just say about givebacks? They have a 10% transaction fee. I donated $100 to my kids' fun run this afternoon, and I got charged $111 and something cents. That's ridiculous. And as a PTA, we should not be forcing our PTAs to use this service. and putting more charges on our parents when we're, trying to raise funds for the PTA itself. And
So
I've done that.
we also used givebacks for our fundraiser, and that transaction fee is optional. They don't make it very obvious where you unclick the option, but it is an optional fee.
I get that it can be a donation. Like, would you rather donate the cost of this transaction? But regardless of who's paying it, the PTA or the parent, 10% is really steep.
That is
Can I
for,
interject? Oh, go ahead.
the 10% is, I'm pretty sure it'd be the fundraising platform of givebacks, which is not a free setting. That is something if you were utilizing it for a fun run, for a readathon.
Right. So
that,
why are we
that's to,
pushing this platform for all of our PTAs to use
we're,
when
we're
they're
not,
actually,
we're not
but we are
pushing the
supposed to use it
fundraiser.
for our memberships.
The membership portion is the free service that they don't charge us. Givebacks doesn't charge PTA units for that piece to host your members. If you choose to use Givebacks versus, say, Booster for your fundraising platform, that's where you're looking at an additional admin fee to cover the costs of the fundraising platform.
That's
Is
not
it
my
possible to make that
understanding.
clear
Yeah,
for all
that's
of the
not,
PTAs? Because that was not clear to me. I was under the impression that we are being recommended to use givebacks for all of our activities.
can I interject? My understanding is that when you set it up, because I do a lot of the fundraising for us, and you can set it up where you do not collect those fees. The only fee that you have to pay is the 3% for a Visa if you use a credit card. For like any of our fundraisers, we're doing our fun run in a couple weeks. We are only paying a 3% credit card fee. You can set it up that way where you're being charged more, but that's the way that you have to set up the fundraiser, not to ask for those fees.
Thank you.
Yeah. I will say it does feel like unless you're doing cash or check, anything that any of those platforms, or any sort of card thing, there's going to be those fees. Our school used the Booster and they're like, do you want to pay $17 fee? I'm like, no, $17. And apparently that was $17 regardless of the amount you were pledging. So, they like to cover their costs, I guess. So, but anyways, are there any other questions?
Can I ask a question about savings accounts? Our PTA has money left over from when COVID happened and the money has not been used. The members are questioning on putting something in savings so that we can make interest, but then I have other members that say that's not what our purpose is. How does Colorado PTA feel about getting a savings account or a money market or a CD or any of that stuff?
So you're a nonprofit, you should be spending your money. That said, you can put it into short-term growth options. If it's a money market or a CD, it's your money, let it grow, but you should also be spending it. I mean, I use the example in the president training that like if you bring in $50,000 a year at your fundraiser, you should be spending 40. You can roll over some, but as far as a nonprofit, it's your job to spend the money. If you do have a lot of it, yes, you can invest it short term.
Well, I understand spending it. We just have some left over from COVID when the schools were shut down and they couldn't use it. We did at the end of the year offer for money for the school to revamp their teachers lounge and things like that. And that was approved. So we've used some of it, but there's still money left and they're just questioning, to get interest. I don't know necessarily if that's what we should be doing.
I would just a thought on another part of that too is again, we're supposed to be spending money, what we bring in. if you guys are having trouble already spending that amount, then what is going to happen with that interest? Then you're just going to keep adding to money that you're not able to spend.
Exactly. There's kind of a
so-
question there. I mean, would you guys prefer not to do that kind of thing? I mean, not to do savings and all that?
Like
No, I
Amy
think
said, I
it's
think the
fine,
short
but
term
maybe
is fine.
maybe take a break from fundraising this year. If you've got more money than you have, maybe, you know, give your families a break and, you know, maybe don't have as a high a goal this year.
Yeah.
So we are at almost 8:15 here. I appreciate everybody who's asking questions, answering questions. We've kind of gone over our time here. You have Chandra's email up there. You may reach me at president@jeffcopta.org. I would like to thank Chandra and Crystal Marine and Sandy Weathers and Jesse Feldman and everybody else who jumped in to answer and help out here this evening. I am going to end the recording here if there is nothing else. Okay.
Crystal, if you wouldn't mind recording that chat since you know the trick.
Okay.
You
But
got it.
I obviously don't know. You're gonna have to teach me. Thank you.
Recording ended here.